And you just know how other units operate and what they are. And there's just something special about taking very vulnerable patients and being there for them during their toughest times. And I think it gives me a lot of it humbles me. We're being an ICU nurse, you know, and I enjoy it. I enjoy every single shift. Of course, there's those hard shifts and you're scratching yourself on your head. You're like, damn, sometimes nursing is just not it, you know?
Yeah, it's tiring work in the ICU, you know? You get tired.
Hell yeah. Imagine during this time of C-19, sometimes you're in the room flipping the patients yourself. And sometimes a nurse comes by and she's like, you need help? As I'm trying to turn to the patient myself. And it's like, no, thank you. Because it takes them 5 minutes to gown on. I'd rather just turn to myself. I'm putting my back at risk. And I just shove the pillow, you know?
Yeah, a lot of solo work going on now because it's just, you're in the room and yes, like Matt said, somebody wants to help you, but by the time they gown in and gown out, you could probably already take care of the task you were doing, right? And even myself, I noticed, like Matt said, we were turning our patients by ourselves more, even boosting them up. So usually I try to Dillenberg my patient and then just pull them up that way, instead of calling for help because, first of all, we're short-staffed and the ratios aren't the most appropriate, even though it's in California, right? It's a crisis, it's a pandemic, so we kind of have to settle our differences and kind of give ourselves an ego check and not be so, I don't want to say needy, but that's just how it is. They're providing for us as much as they can. If they had the chance to staff adequately, I'm sure they would. I'm sure they're taking all the measures, but it's just the time that we live in. It's just hard to get as much staff as you would need just because it's such a bad time. And of course, even for travel nurses, there are very high paying contracts. So, in this point in time, a lot of nurses are chasing money, which, no hate for that. Chase that check, right? But, these hospitals that are paying a little bit less, they're not going to be as up there just based on location, right? Because California was always a hot spot, right?
Yeah.
Now for travel nurses, because, the weather's amazing, the climate's amazing, but now it's the southern states. Why? The weather there is okay, but the money's there. So me as a travel nurse, I would rather make, $10K a week or X amount of $1,000 a week, in not the most ideal state, than go to California just for the climate,
I agree with you, man. So next time we might just pick up a crisis rate.
Yeah.
So just to get a little synopsis of why we prefer the ICU. So maybe those have never worked in the ICU, don't understand what the intensive care unit is. It's basically dedicated to critically ill patients that require close supervision. Let's just say normally you're going to have a 5-to-1 patient ratio. In med-surg, you're 6-to-1 outside of Cali. Here, you're going to have usually 2-to-1. You're going to have patients that are usually intubated. They're going to be on pressors. Sometimes if a patient had a stroke and we give them TPA, the anti-clot buster, they're going to be in the ICU for one-on-one supervision for the first, 12 hours? First 6 hours when they get the clot buster. You're going to be managing multiple drips. And sometimes you might even have a 1-to-1 patient. So those are even critical. They require constant monitoring. Those are patients that have a balloon pumps, are Impella, fresh open hearts, CRT, we need renal replacements, ECMO, when they do bypasses. And sometimes we see those patients. Some ICUs, you'll have a special department like neurology, cardiac for CVICU nurses, and sometimes it could just be a general ICU. The ones that we're working with currently in this contract, it's a general ICU. We see everything from COVID to ECMO devices to CRT, intubated, regular ETOHs, which is not prevalent as much now. It's a very, very wide variety. So I'm very thankful for us to be able to see all this, And
not only is it very patient care intensive, we also have to, chart everything. So in ICU, we don't chart every 4 hours or whatever. We literally chart every hour. These drips are going every hour. We do eyes and nose every hour. We do hourly rounds. And even like Matt said, if we have a stroke patient, guess what? We're doing neural assessments or the NIHA scale every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes. That's why they're in the ICU, because they're very sick. And it looks like from an outside perspective, 2 patients, that doesn't sound too bad. Yeah, but the amount of things you're doing for those 2 patients and the amount of monitoring you're doing, it's a lot. And then you throw in charting every hour. You have to be very mindful of your time and mindful of the patient status, because in the ICU, patient can drop at any point in time. Yeah. Especially if you have a patient that has weird arrhythmias, they're going in and out of VTAC and no one can really figure out why. Their lights are fine, but they have heart failure, so it's one of the complications, and you can't figure out why. Those patients are going to tank and they're going to drop fairly quickly. So it's you have to be literally on your toes all the time. I said, 2 patients does seem like a lot, but the amount of stuff you're doing for those patients, it's a lot of work. And there's no CNAs either, so there's no help. It's just nurses and nurses helping each other. And like we said before, it's a pandemic, so you can't even have two nurses in a room sometimes. You just can't always have it happen. But we're literally doing all their turning, we're doing all the patient care, we're doing all the baths, we're doing all the oral care, we're eyes and nose every hour. Like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, even though we prefer, like, we get our ass kicked, man. It's tough. Not to mention, like, let's just say you have 9 drips or 8 drips. Every single hour you have to input those numbers into the what's it called? The monitoring, or what? Geez, I'm blanking out.
Like
into the electronic medical record. That's what I wanted to say, because in our hospital, the vitals and everything. Oh, vitals transfer over, but not the eyes and nose. So we have to manually put in all our drips. That takes a lot of work sometimes. Like, and if you're doing CRRT, let's just say 1-to-1, it doesn't sound like anything. You have one patient, wow. But like every single hour, you have to go into the room, chart the numbers, then you have to adjust the blood flows to see how much the pump is going to take fluids away from the patient. Sometimes you have to go in there because their pressure can't handle it. You got to adjust it. Like, there's a lot of critical thinking, and there's a lot of back and forth in the rooms going on.
So even though, like, our first point was we like the ICU for that reason, because we have less patients, so 2 patients was one of our first reasons that we like the ICU. There is a lot of critical thinking around it. Like Matt said, there's so much to do where most of the time you're always busy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. Like, I rather have 2 patients and focus all my care on those people compared to having 4, 5, or 6 patients and just be in the room for a little bit out and then off to the next patient, right?